Did you just say my dad isn't handsome? Trisha turned around slowly. Standing right behind her, arms crossed, glasses slightly crooked, tiny black suit, the energy of someone who had been personally insulted, was a boy. Couldn't be more than 7 years old. Maybe 8. But the look on his face? That was not a child's look. That was a prosecutor. I heard you, he said. Voice low. Calm. Deadly calm. You said my dad isn't handsome. Trisha looked at him. Then across the ballroom. Then back at him. I said he's not that handsome, she said carefully. He tilted his head. So you did say it. That's not the same. I have a notebook. He reached into his tiny jacket and pulled it out. An actual notebook. With a pen. I've been taking notes. Would you like to see them? Beside Trisha, her best friend Yemi made a sound. A small, strangled, desperately held back sound. You, Trisha started. Because, the boy continued, flipping it open, I have been standing in this ballroom for the last 40 minutes. And I have been watching. And what I have written in this notebook, he looked up at her over the top of his glasses, does not support your position at all. The ballroom carried on around them. Chandeliers. Champagne. Important people doing important things. None of it was as interesting as this. Yemi gripped Trisha's arm. Her nails were saying, do not walk away from this. You're going to show me evidence, Trisha said slowly. That your father is handsome. I already have the evidence. I'm just deciding how much of it you need. He clicked his pen. How much do you think you need? If you are already smiling and in love with this boy and you haven't even heard the full story yet, you need to subscribe and like the story right now. Because this story is just getting started. Stay with me. Also tell me in the comment section where in the world you're watching from. Earlier that evening, Trisha had not wanted to be there. She had been very clear about this. I have work, she told Yemi on the phone. It's Friday. I work on Fridays. Trisha. It's a charity gala. There will be connections. Investors. People your brand needs. My brand is fine. Your brand could be finer. She had worn the red dress specifically because it required no ironing and therefore required the least investment in an evening she had already decided to survive rather than enjoy. She had arrived with Yemi, accepted 1 glass of champagne, and immediately began calculating the earliest polite exit time. Then the room shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. It was more like a change in pressure. The kind you feel before you see. Yemi grabbed her arm. Do not look immediately, she whispered. Wait 2 seconds. Then look toward the entrance. Trisha waited 2 seconds. Looked. Kang Ji-won had just walked in. Tall. Sharp dark suit. The kind of face that arrived in a room before the rest of him caught up. He stood completely still near the entrance while the entire ballroom quietly, almost unconsciously, reorganized its attention in his direction. That, Yemi said reverently, is Kang Ji-won, CEO of Kang Tech Industries. 34. Single. Worth more than most small countries. Trisha looked at him for a moment. He's okay, she said. Yemi turned to stare at her. He is okay. Good looking. Nothing extraordinary. Trisha. That man's face could stop traffic on a closed road. He's not that handsome. Trisha sipped her champagne. I've seen better. She said it at a completely normal volume. A casual, honest, conversational statement between 2 women at a crowded party. Which was why she was completely unprepared for the voice that came from directly behind her. Excuse me. She turned around. And there he was. Tiny black suit. Crossed arms. Glasses slightly crooked. A boy who had clearly heard every single word and had made a decision. Did you just say my dad isn't handsome? And now the real conversation begins. Because this boy, Kang Min-Ho, 7 years old, almost 8, had been standing near the dessert table when he heard it. 2 women. Eyes pointed directly at his father. Not that handsome. He had looked at his father. Then back at the woman in red. Then he had straightened his jacket, picked up his notebook, and walked over. Someone had to handle this. I said he's not that handsome, Trisha said carefully, still processing the existence of this child in front of her. Same thing. It really isn't. Not that handsome means not handsome enough to be remarkable. He pushed his glasses up. Are you saying my father is not remarkable? I'm saying he's ordinary. The boy's eyes went wide. Not with hurt. With the specific disbelief of someone who has just been told something so incorrect it almost loops back around to being funny. Ordinary, he repeated. Fairly. He opened his notebook. Okay, he said. Let's look at the evidence. Yemi put her champagne glass down. Both hands now free. This required full physical attention. In the 40 minutes before my father arrived, Min-Ho began. You were counting before he arrived? I count things at events. It's useful. Stop interrupting. He ran his finger down the page. In the 40 minutes before my father arrived, I observed 0 women in this room look at the same man twice. 0. He looked up. My father walked in 11 minutes ago. You have looked at him 3 times. He turned the notebook to show her. Woman in red. 3 looks. 11 minutes. That is once every 3 minutes and 40 seconds. For someone you have described as ordinary. Trisha opened her mouth. Also, he continued before she could speak, the man standing at the door fixed his tie when my father walked past him. People do not fix themselves for ordinary people. They fix themselves because they suddenly feel they need to try harder. He clicked his pen shut. That is not my opinion. That is human behavior. You're 7, Trisha said. Almost 8. And being almost 8 does not make me wrong. He looked at her steadily. You are a fashion person. Your name tag says so. You look at things for a living. You decide what deserves the world's attention. He gestured across the ballroom toward his father. And you're professional, expert, trained. I looked at that man and gave me ordinary? Yemi pressed both hands over her mouth. Trisha looked at this child. This small, suited, notebook-carrying, argument-winning child. He has a decent face, she said. Min-Ho wrote that down. Showed it to her. Decent face. In careful, deliberate handwriting. This is what you're giving me, he said. That's what I'm giving you. He nodded slowly. Put the notebook away. Looked up at her with the patience of someone who had decided to be generous. I want you to look at him one more time, he said. Not quickly. Properly. Like you're looking at something for your brand. He was completely serious. And then I want you to tell me the true answer. I am not taking instructions. I'm not giving instructions. I'm giving you an opportunity to correct yourself before this becomes embarrassing. He paused. More embarrassing. Yemi made a sound that was technically not a laugh but was spiritually entirely a laugh. Trisha, against every instinct, against all reason, looked. Jiwon was across the room. Still talking. Completely unaware. And the more she actually looked, properly looked, the less the word ordinary cooperated. She looked back at Min-Ho. He was waiting. Arms still crossed. One eyebrow slightly raised. Fine, she said. Fine what? Fine. He's handsome. Silence. He waited. Very handsome. Still waiting. Extremely. The word came out like a confession. Extremely handsome. Happy? Min-Ho smiled. And it was devastating. Bright and triumphant and completely without apology. The smile of a boy who had walked across a ballroom with a mission and was walking back with everything he came for. Thank you, he said, for your honesty. He reached into his jacket one more time and produced a business card. Held it out formally. My father's contact. His name is Kang Ji-won. A pause. Tell him the woman from the gala thinks he's extremely handsome. He'll pretend not to care. Another pause. He'll care. She took the card. My birthday is in 3 weeks, he added. I'm turning 8. Small party. You should come. Not an invitation. A confirmed appointment he was informing her of. My dad doesn't meet many honest people. You said something wrong first, then something true. That's better than most people here tonight. He turned to leave. Stopped. Turned back to Yemi, who was in a condition that could only be described as completely fallen apart. You're welcome, he said to her. For the entertainment. And then he walked back across the ballroom. Small. Straight-backed. Notebook in pocket. Entirely unbothered. Yemi stared after him. Her mascara had shifted. Her whole face was undone. Trisha, she whispered. Don't. He had a notebook. I know. He was counting before the man even arrived. Yemi. I have never in my life. She picked up her champagne and drank. Set it down. I love that child. I don't know him. But I love him. Across the room, Min-Ho had returned to the dessert table. He helped himself to something chocolatey. Glanced up once, met Trisha's eyes across the ballroom, and gave her a single nod. Businesslike. Settled. We're done here. Trisha looked down at the business card in her hand. Then at Ji-won, still talking, still oblivious. Then at the boy who had just walked across a party to defend his father's face with a notebook full of evidence and one. She shook her head slowly. But she put the card in her bag. And for the first time all evening, she was glad she came. She told herself it was curiosity. That was the word she used when Yemi called Friday evening asking what she was doing Saturday. Curious about the child. Not, I have looked at that business card 4 times this week. Not, I opened a search tab on Tuesday, typed his father's name, and then closed it immediately because that felt like a line she wasn't ready to cross. Just curiosity. About a 7-year-old with a notebook and a personal policy against logical contradictions. She spent 20 minutes deciding what to bring as a gift. This was also, she decided, completely normal. 3 books. Logic and debate, obviously. Astronomy, because he had mentioned it twice at the gala in 2 unconnected contexts. A thick adventure novel because a child who read fast needed something that would last. She wrapped them herself, which she never did, and then stood looking at the finished package for a moment before picking up her keys and leaving before she could think about it more. The Kang family home sat on a quiet road above the city, behind a gate that opened onto a garden that was precise and warm at the same time. The kind of garden where someone had thought carefully about every single thing. She almost drove past it. Not because she couldn't find it. Because for one moment, sitting outside with the engine running, she had the feeling of standing at the edge of something she couldn't name yet. She sat with it for exactly 4 seconds. Then she turned the engine off and got out. She had barely made it through the gate when Min-Ho appeared. Not walked. Appeared. One moment she was alone on the path and the next he was simply there, arms crossed, glasses slightly crooked, wearing a birthday badge that said 8 today in large letters. You came, he said. I said I would. People say things. A pause. But you came. Good. He looked at the package under her arm. What is it? Books. He took the package without asking. Examined it from several angles. How many? 3. Which subjects? You'll find out when you open it. He looked at her. Looked at the package. Looked back at her. Is one of them about debate? Open it and see. I'm going to say yes based on your facial expression. He tucked it under his arm with the confidence of someone who had already won this round. Then he straightened and looked across the garden. My dad is near the wall. Trisha followed his gaze. Ji-won was standing near the far end of the garden, talking to one of the teachers, looking composed and slightly like a man who had organized a children's birthday party and was now living inside it without a clear role. I see him, Trisha said. He won't come to you. Min-Ho, I just arrived. I know. That's fine. Go to him. He was already turning away toward a group of children near the center of the garden. Early is better for these things. The longer you wait, the more time he has to think about what to say, and then he'll say something professional and it'll be awkward for everyone. He'll say something professional, like welcome to the event or thank you for attending. Min-Ho said this in a voice that was a surprisingly accurate impression of a man being formally polite. Just go now while he's still distracted. It's easier. And then he was gone, absorbed back into the garden like he had never left it, already arguing with a small boy about something Trisha couldn't hear. She stood on the path for a moment. Then, against her better judgment, she went to the wall. Ji-won saw her coming and wrapped up his conversation with the teacher with the efficiency of a man who had decided something without showing that he'd decided it. You actually came, he said. I said I would. Something moved briefly through his face. He stopped. Started more carefully. He mentioned it. Several times. This week. How many times is several? Ji-won considered the word. Daily. Daily. With updates. He paused. Tuesday he informed me you had confirmed. Wednesday he said you hadn't cancelled. Thursday he said, a brief, helpless beat. He said the probability of you not coming was now statistically negligible. Trisha pressed her lips together very hard. I apologize, Ji-won said. Please don't, she said. That's the most I've laughed this week. He looked at her for a moment. Then at his son across the garden, who was now apparently running the dinosaur debate with 3 children simultaneously and winning all 3 arguments. He has a system, Ji-won said. I haven't fully mapped it yet. I don't think you're supposed to. Ji-won looked at her again. Quickly. Like he hadn't decided to but did anyway. The party moved through its rhythms. Cake, chocolate, 3 layers, because Min-Ho had apparently been very clear with Mrs. Park that 2 layers was a philosophical statement about giving up. A game that Min-Ho had designed himself with rules that Trisha only understood halfway through but which seemed to be structured so that the smallest children had the best chance of winning. A period of general beautiful chaos that Mrs. Park dissolved simply by appearing in the center of it. Through all of it, Trisha found herself watching Min-Ho. Not the way you watched children at parties. The way you watched someone you were trying to figure out. He was funny. Genuinely, naturally funny, not performing it, just operating at a frequency that produced comedy as a byproduct. When Juno insisted for the 4th time that dinosaurs were probably still alive somewhere, Min-Ho produced his notebook, opened to what appeared to be a prepared page, and said, I made a chart. Would you like to see the chart, Juno? Juno said yes. The chart was incomprehensible to everyone including possibly Min-Ho, but he presented it with such authority that 3 children nodded seriously. But underneath the funny thing was the other thing. The way he checked on people without making it visible. The small boy sitting slightly apart, Min-Ho drifted over casually, said something, made him laugh, drifted away again without drawing attention to any of it. The way he kept the dinosaur argument fun rather than just winning it, kept looking at Juno's face to make sure he was smiling. The way he noticed the teacher's empty cup before she did and went to fill it like it was the most natural thing in the world. He was 8 years old. And he was taking care of everyone at his own birthday party. Trisha was still thinking about this when Min-Ho appeared at her elbow. You and my dad haven't talked in 40 minutes, he said, without preamble. I've been watching the party. You've been watching me. He said it without ego. Just accurately. That's fine. But you should talk to him. He's been trying to think of something to say for 20 minutes and he's going to run out of time and say something about the weather. He's going to. He does that. When he doesn't know what to say he comments on conditions. Temperature. Visibility. Min-Ho looked at her seriously over his glasses. He said mild evening to our neighbor once for 3 minutes straight. Go. Save him from himself. Before she could respond he had vanished again. She looked across the garden. Ji-won was standing with his hands in his pockets looking at the sky. She walked over. Mild evening, she said. Ji-won looked at her. Something passed through his face. He told you about that. He's concerned. He's, a pause. A breath that was almost a laugh. He's always concerned. He looked at his son across the garden. The almost laugh faded into something quieter. Something that stayed on his face longer than he probably meant it to. He has been since he was 5 years old. I don't know where he got it from. Maybe he learned it from someone, Trisha said. Ji-won looked at her. Not quickly this time. A real look. Neither of them said anything. Across the garden Min-Ho glanced over, saw them standing together, and gave a small satisfied nod before turning back to his guests. When the other children had gone and the garden had gotten quiet, Min-Ho dropped onto the bench beside Trisha with the particular exhaustion of someone who had been holding a lot of things up and could finally put them down. He didn't say anything for a moment. Neither did she. The evening light was coming in low through the garden trees and Min-Ho sat with his legs dangling and his jacket slightly crooked and his glasses smudged, looking for the first time all day like exactly what he was. A tired child. Good party, she said. It was. He looked at his badge. 8 today. He straightened it with 2 fingers. I planned this one myself. The guest list, the food, the game. A pause. I wanted to do this one myself. This one. Not this year. Not this time around. This one. Trisha heard it. She didn't know what to do with it yet, so she let it sit. The chart you showed Juno, she said instead. What was it actually a chart of? Min-Ho was quiet for 1 second. Geological time periods. Was any of it relevant to the argument? Another second. Not directly. But it worked. It always works, he said, with the serenity of someone reporting a law of nature. People see a chart and they become uncertain about their own position. It's a documented phenomenon. He pushed his glasses up. I read about it. She laughed. A real one. He glanced at her sideways when she laughed. Something in his expression, pleased, warm, filing it away. My dad laughed today, he said then. Quieter. Twice. Did you see? I saw. Once at the dinosaur thing. Once at, he paused, deciding something, once at something you said near the wall. He looked at the garden. He doesn't laugh out loud a lot. He smiles. But out loud is different. A beat. He looks like a different person when he does it. Trisha looked at the boy beside her. He was watching the spot where his father had been standing earlier. His face was doing the complicated thing again, the layered thing that was too old for his age and too careful for a birthday and too full of something she still couldn't name. He works a lot, Min-Ho said. I know why. He cares about things and working is how he shows it. He paused. A long one. Careful. But I think sometimes he's so busy taking care of everything that he forgets to just, he stopped. Looked for the word. Be in the room. Trisha was quiet. I'm working on that, Min-Ho added, in a tone that made it sound like a project with measurable outcomes. He's better than he was. It's a slow process. And where do I fit in this process, she asked. Lightly. But genuinely. Min-Ho looked at her with the expression of someone who has been waiting for this question and has the answer completely prepared. You're the variable, he said simply. Everything else I can manage myself. But I can't be his, he stopped. Reconsidered his phrasing. He needs someone who isn't me. Do you understand? She did understand. She just wasn't entirely sure an 8-year-old should be saying it. Ji-won appeared in the garden doorway. He looked at his son on the bench first. The way he always looked at him, that constant, total attention, the kind that had nothing to do with watching and everything to do with something else she still didn't have the right word for. Then he looked at Trisha. Thank you for coming, he said. Simple. Genuine. Not professional. Thank you for having me. A small silence. The good kind. Then Min-Ho hopped off the bench. Looked at Trisha. Adjusted his birthday badge one final time. You'll come back, right? Not will you? Not I hope you will. You'll come back. Like he was confirming a scheduled appointment. Like the answer mattered more than the lightness of the question suggested. Like underneath the certainty was something that wasn't certain at all, and he needed her to close the gap. She looked at him. At that face. At the smudged glasses and the birthday badge and the exhaustion he had finally stopped hiding. "Yes," she said. "I'll come back." Min-Ho held her gaze for 1 second longer than necessary. Then he nodded once and went inside. The garden was quiet. Ji-won was still in the doorway. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the door his son had gone through. "He doesn't ask people that," he said. Quietly. Not explaining. Just saying it into the air between them. She didn't ask what he meant. She understood what he meant. She drove home with the windows down and the city moving past her and Min-Ho's voice in her head saying "You'll come back," right in that particular way, light on the surface, and underneath it, something that felt like the most important question she'd been asked in a very long time. She didn't close the tab this time. She came back. The first time was a Tuesday. She was in her studio going over fabric samples when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Hello. It's Min-Ho." She put down the fabric. "How did you get this number?" "The back of my dad's business card has his assistant's number. I called and said I was following up on a gala connection. She gave me your studio line." A pause. She was very helpful. She gave a child a stranger's number. She gave the CEO's son a professional contact. There's a difference. He said it the way he said most things, like the distinction was obvious and he was being generous by explaining it. "Also, I told her it was urgent." "Was it urgent?" "I had questions about the books." A brief pause. The astronomy one. Chapter 4. It says light from distant stars takes thousands of years to reach us. So when we look at a star we're actually seeing what it looked like thousands of years ago. Another pause. That means some of those stars might not even exist anymore. We're just seeing the light they left behind. Trisha was quiet for a moment. "Yes. That's right. I've been thinking about that for 3 days, Min-Ho said. I couldn't decide if it was beautiful or sad." "What did you decide?" "Both," he said simply. "I decided it was both." A beat. "Okay. Second question. The logic book. Chapter 2 says a valid argument can still have a false conclusion if the premises are wrong. Can you give me an example? I want to use it on my science teacher on Thursday." She pulled her chair out and sat down. They talked for 45 minutes. The following Tuesday he called again. This time about Chapter 7 of the astronomy book, which had apparently contained information about black holes that he had strong feelings about. The Tuesday after that it was about a debate he had won at school that he wanted to walk her through step by step because, he said, she would appreciate the structure even if she hadn't been there. She did appreciate it. She also started leaving her Tuesday afternoons free without deciding to. For weeks after the birthday party, Min-Ho called on a Wednesday, irregular, which meant something had happened. "I have a proposition," he said. "Good morning to you too." "Good morning. I have a proposition." He moved past the greeting with the efficiency of someone who found social preamble structurally inefficient. "Your studio. I want to visit." "Why?" "I've been thinking about the layout based on what you described last week. I think there are some problems." "Problems?" "Structural inefficiencies. In the display arrangement." He said this with complete confidence. "I'd like to see it in person before I make my full assessment." She looked around her studio. At the rails of fabric. The display boards. The carefully arranged samples she had spent 3 years perfecting. "Min-Ho. I've been running this studio for." "I know. That's why it needs fresh eyes." A pause. "Also my dad has a meeting until 4. Mrs. Park can drop me at yours at 2 if that works." It worked. She didn't entirely know why she said yes, but she did. He arrived at 2 o'clock precisely, wearing a school uniform and carrying his notebook, and stood in the doorway of her studio for a full 30 seconds without saying anything. Just looking. She let him look. He walked in slowly, notebook open, pen moving. He circled the main display area. Stopped in front of the fabric wall. Tilted his head at it from 2 different angles. Made a sound that was not quite disapproval but was adjacent to it. "What?" Trisha said. "The red fabrics," he said. "They're next to the orange ones. That's the warm tone section." "I know what it is. But the red is fighting the orange." He pointed. "Your eye doesn't know where to go first, so it doesn't go anywhere. You're losing impact." He moved to the other side. "Also, this display board is catching shadow from the window in the afternoon. Whatever you put here after 2 o'clock is working against itself." She looked at the board. At the shadow. At the red and orange fabrics. She didn't say anything. "I'm right," he said, not unkindly. "You're 8 years old. Almost 9. And I've read 4 books about visual communication." He was already writing in his notebook. "My dad says the most expensive mistake in business is not listening to correct information because of where it came from." He looked up at her over his glasses. "He was talking about board meetings, but I think it applies here too." Trisha sat on the edge of her work table and watched this child walk through her studio making notes. He stopped in front of a half-finished garment on the dress form. Looked at it for a long time. The fabric was deep green silk, structured at the shoulders, still pinned at the hem. "Who is this for?" he asked. "A client. Her daughter's traditional wedding." "The green is beautiful," he said quietly. "Not assessment anymore. Just response." He reached out one finger and touched the edge of the fabric very gently, the way people touched things they found genuinely beautiful. "My mom liked green." The studio went quiet. Trisha looked at him. He was still looking at the dress. His expression had shifted, the analyst was gone, something younger and unguarded had taken its place, just for a moment. "Mrs. Park told me," he said, still looking at the fabric. "She said my mom wore a green dress the day she and my dad met. At a gallery." A pause. "I've never seen a picture of it. But I think about it sometimes." Trisha didn't speak. Min-Ho looked at the dress for one more moment. Then he straightened and pushed his glasses up and the notebook came back up and he was himself again. "The hem should be 2 centimeters shorter," he said. "For the proportions." She looked at the hem. He was right about that too. She moved the red fabrics that afternoon. She adjusted the display board. She took 2 centimeters off the hem. She didn't tell anyone. But she thought about a green dress at a gallery. And a boy who had never seen a picture of it but thought about it sometimes. 3 weeks later, her phone buzzed at 8:47 on a Thursday morning. "My dad has lunch free today. In case you are nearby and do not want to eat alone." She read it twice. Then she looked at her calendar. She had a supplier meeting at 10, near Kang Min-Ho's building, that would be finished by noon. She looked at the message again. "In case you are nearby." She typed back, "Funny. I have a meeting nearby this morning." 3 seconds. "What a coincidence," Min-Ho replied. "He likes the restaurant on the ground floor of his building. He usually sits by the window. He will already be there but he won't say he was expecting you, so just act normal." She stared at her phone. "Also, he hasn't eaten breakfast, so he will be in a slightly better mood than usual when the food arrives. Good luck." She laughed for a full minute. Out loud. Alone in her apartment. The kind of laugh that surprised you. Then she got ready for her supplier meeting. Ji-won was already there when she arrived. Sitting by the window, exactly as described, reading something on his phone. He looked up when she came in and his expression did the thing it sometimes did, a very brief, very contained moment of something before it settled back into composed. He looked at his phone. Then at her. She held up her screen showing Min-Ho's message. He looked at his own screen. Turned it to show her the identical message sent 30 seconds earlier. "Miss Trisha's meeting ends at noon. In case you want company for lunch. She is very punctual, so she will be there by 12:05. Do not say anything professional." A beat of silence. Then Ji-won set his phone face down on the table with the careful precision of a man choosing not to respond to something. He told me not to say anything professional, Ji-won said. I know. He told me you would anyway. Did he? He said you'd probably comment on the weather. Ji-won looked at her for one long moment. It's a mild afternoon, he said. She sat down across from him and laughed, and he smiled, not the contained almost smile she had seen at the birthday party, a real one, brief and surprised at itself, and the waiter came and they ordered and the afternoon opened up in front of them like something neither of them had planned for. The lunch lasted 2 hours. She had not expected 2 hours. She had thought one, maybe. She had a 2:30 call she was vaguely aware of in the background for the first 40 minutes and then forgot about entirely. Ji-won talked differently here than he had at the gala or the birthday. Less composed. More considered, like he was choosing words not because he was guarded but because he actually thought about what he wanted to say before saying it. She found that she had to pay attention differently with him. He didn't repeat himself. He didn't perform. He just said things. At some point she was talking about her brand and she said something about her mother's fabrics, the ones she'd inherited, the bolts of Ankara she kept in the back of the studio not because she used them but because she couldn't give them away, and she said it lightly, the way she always did, the way she had practiced until it didn't catch in her throat anymore. Ji-won was quiet for a moment after she said it. How old were you? He asked. 12. He nodded. He didn't say I'm sorry the way people usually did, filling the space with condolence because they didn't know what else to put there. He just received it. Let it sit between them as what it was, a thing that had happened, a thing that had shaped her, a thing she was still carrying in the back of the studio in bolts of fabric she couldn't release. Do you ever use them? He asked. Her fabrics. Sometimes. 4 pieces that matter. She looked at her glass. I made a dress for my cousin's wedding 2 years ago. Used one of the Ankara bolts. My aunt saw it and, she stopped. She said it looked like something my mother would have chosen. Ji-won was quiet. I didn't know if that was the best thing she could have said or the hardest, Trisha said. Both, Ji-won said. She looked up. He was looking at her steadily. Not with pity. Not with the careful sympathy of someone managing her feelings from a distance. With recognition. The specific recognition of someone who knew exactly how a thing could be both the best and the hardest at the same time and had stopped trying to choose between them. Both, she said. Yes. She didn't ask about his wife. She could feel the shape of that loss from where she was sitting, the way it existed around him, not on him, the way old grief settled into the structure of a person rather than sitting on the surface. She didn't need him to tell her. She could see it in the way he talked about Min-Ho. In the way he talked about most things, actually, if you paid attention. She paid attention. Does it get easier? She asked instead. Not about his wife. Just, in general. The way loss lived inside you. Ji-won considered this the way he considered everything. Not quickly. I think it gets quieter, he said finally. Not easier. Quieter. You learn to live around it. She nodded. And then something happens, he said, and it's loud again for a while. He was looking at the window when he said the last part. At the street outside. At nothing specific. She didn't ask what the something was. She already knew. She was back at the studio by 3, an hour late for her call, which she apologized for and rescheduled without fully processing it. She sat at her work table for a while not working. Outside, the afternoon light was doing the thing it did in the middle of the week when the city moved at its ordinary pace and nothing remarkable was supposed to happen. She thought about both. The way he had said it. Immediately. Without having to think about it. Like he had been living in the answer to that question for a long time and it was simply true. She thought about the shape of his face at the window when he said and then something happens. She thought about Min-Ho in her studio. One finger on the edge of green silk. My mom liked green. She pulled her fabric wall apart that afternoon and rearranged the whole thing. Warm tones separated. Display board moved away from the afternoon shadow. The red fabrics given their own space to breathe. It looked better. She stood back and looked at it for a long time. Min-Ho started coming to the studio on Wednesdays after school. This was not discussed or formally arranged. It simply began happening. The first Wednesday he appeared at the door at 4 o'clock and said he had a book question that was too complicated for a phone call. The second Wednesday he arrived with a notebook and said he had been thinking more about the display boards and had additional notes. The third Wednesday he brought a chess set and said he was teaching himself and needed an opponent who wouldn't let him win. "I don't know how to play chess," Trisha said. "I'll teach you." He set the board up on her work table with practiced efficiency. "I'm also still learning, so we'll be bad together. It'll be a fair game." "That is not how chess works." "It will be how this chess works." He set the last piece down and looked at it. "Also, I think it's good to be bad at things sometimes. My dad is bad at being relaxed. I think he needs more practice." Trisha sat down across from him. "Does he know you're here?" "Mrs. Park drops me off." "He knows." Min-Ho moved upon. "He asked if it was okay with you." "I said yes on your behalf." "I hope that's fine." "You told him I said yes before asking me." "I was confident in the outcome." He looked up. "Was I wrong?" She looked at the chessboard. At this child sitting across from her in her studio on a Wednesday afternoon with a chess set he had brought himself. "No," she said. "You weren't wrong." He nodded. Satisfied. The way he always was when the world confirmed what he had already decided. They played for an hour. It was terrible chess. Min-Ho narrated his own moves with the commentary of a sports announcer, questioned several of her moves with genuine academic interest, and at one point produced a small book of openings from his jacket pocket and consulted it openly without any shame. "You can't look at the book during the game," Trisha said. "It's a reference." "References are allowed. In chess specifically they are not. I'm going to need you to show me that rule in writing." He didn't close the book. She laughed. Min-Ho looked at her when she laughed. He did this every time, glanced at her face, just briefly, like he was checking something. Filing something away. She noticed it every time. She just didn't know yet what he was filing. The afternoon she understood something was wrong started ordinarily. Min-Ho arrived at 4. Usual Wednesday. Chess set under one arm, notebook under the other. He set up the board and they began. He was better than 2 weeks ago, he had clearly been practicing, his openings were more deliberate, he was thinking 2 moves ahead instead of 1. 20 minutes in, he stopped mid-move. Just stopped. Hand resting on the piece, eyes slightly unfocused, like he had paused in the middle of a sentence and lost the rest of it. Trisha watched him. After a few seconds he blinked and picked the piece up and moved it. "You okay?" she said. Lightly. "Fine. I was thinking." He looked at the board. "Your turn." She moved. He studied the board. He looked pale, she thought, but the studio light was different in the afternoon, maybe it was the light. He was probably just tired. Children got tired. She moved her bishop. Min-Ho looked at it. Then he smiled, small and satisfied, and moved his knight, and said, "I've been waiting 3 moves for you to do that." "You set me up." "I set you up 2 Wednesdays ago," he said. "I've been patient." She stared at the board. At the trap she had walked into across 2 separate sessions without knowing it. "You're 8 years old," she said. "Almost 9. He sat back. A faint tiredness around his eyes that she had been telling herself was the light. "And I think that's checkmate in 2 moves. But we can keep playing if you want. It's more fun when you don't know it's over yet." She kept playing. But she watched him differently for the rest of the afternoon. The way he held his cup of tea with both hands when Mrs. Park brought it. The way he leaned against the back of his chair slightly more than usual. The way, at 5:30, when Mrs. Park arrived to collect him, he stood up slowly, just a beat slower than she expected, and took a moment before he picked up his bag. Just a moment. Small. Barely there. But she noticed. And Ji-won, she realized, was not surprised when he arrived the following week and Min-Ho was quieter than usual. He just looked at his son, briefly, from the doorway with that look, the one she had seen at the birthday party, in the garden, at the end of the evening. The memorizing look. She looked at Ji-won looking at his son. And the feeling she had been carrying for weeks without naming it, the one that said something is wrong, moved from her chest into her stomach and stayed there. She just didn't know yet what it was. One Thursday evening she was working late when she heard something fall in the small back room where Min-Ho had been sitting reading while she finished alterations. She came through the door to find him on the couch, book on the floor, fast asleep. He had gone out mid-sentence apparently, the book was splayed face down where it had slipped from his hands, glasses still on his nose but sliding. She picked the book up quietly. She placed a folded fabric length over him, the only blanket-like thing in the studio. She stood there for a moment looking at him. Asleep, he looked entirely his age. All the composure and wit and deliberate management fell away and what was left was just a boy. Small. A little pale. Eyelashes very dark against his cheek. Breathing slowly. She thought about this one. Said at the birthday party with a particular weight she had filed away without opening. She thought about he smiles more now. He used to not smile very much. Said by an 8-year-old like someone monitoring a project. Someone with a timeline. She thought about the way Ji-won looked at his son. She stood very still in the back room of her studio with a sleeping child on her couch and she thought about all the small things she had been collecting without realizing she was collecting them. And the feeling moved again. Lower. Colder. She went back to her work table. She did not do any more alterations. She just sat there until Ji-won arrived, and when he appeared in the doorway and she pointed silently toward the back room and he went through, she watched from the doorway without him knowing. He stood over his sleeping son. Every wall down. Every controlled, composed, carefully maintained surface, gone. What was underneath was enormous and quiet and terrified in the specific way of someone who had already been through loss once and knew exactly what it looked like when it was coming again. He crouched down. Picked up Min-Ho's glasses gently. Folded them. Set them on the cushion beside his son's head. He stayed crouched there for a moment. Just looking at his son's face. The way you looked at something you were memorizing. Trisha stepped back from the doorway. She went to her work table and she sat down and she pressed both hands flat against the surface and she breathed. Something was wrong. She knew it now. She didn't have the full shape of it yet. But she knew. She had come to return a notebook. That was all. Min-Ho had left it at the studio the previous Wednesday, tucked between two cushions on the couch where he had fallen asleep. She had found it Thursday morning when she moved the cushions. Small. Blue cover. His name written on the front in careful letters, and underneath it, in smaller writing, evidence. In case anyone forgets. She had held it for a moment before putting it in her bag. It was a Tuesday. She had a supplier call at 3. She thought she would drop the notebook on her way, leave it with whoever answered the door, be back at her studio in 40 minutes. Mrs. Park answered. She looked at Trisha on the doorstep. Then she looked at Trisha's face, whatever was in it, whatever Trisha didn't know was in it, and she said. Come inside. I'll make tea. I just came to drop this off. I have a call at. Come inside, Mrs. Park said again. Gently. But not like a question. The kitchen was warm. Afternoon light through the window over the sink. 2 cups on the table. The kind of kitchen that had fed a child breakfast every morning for 8 years and had the particular feeling of rooms that had held a great deal of life. Trisha sat down. She was still holding the notebook. Mrs. Park set the tea down and sat across from her and folded her hands and looked at Trisha with the eyes of a woman who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had decided, today, that she didn't have to carry it alone anymore. Min-Ho is sick, she said. She said it directly. Without preamble. Because she was not a woman who dressed things up. Trisha looked at her. His heart, Mrs. Park said. He has been sick for a long time. The kitchen was very quiet. Trisha heard the words. She understood each one individually. She understood them in the order they were delivered. But for a moment they didn't assemble into meaning, they just sat in the air in front of her like objects she didn't yet know how to pick up. How long, she said. Her voice came out even. She didn't know how. Since he was 5. Mrs. Park wrapped both hands around her cup. There have been doctors. Many of them. Different hospitals. Different opinions. She paused. The opinions have become less different over time. Trisha looked at the table. The current understanding, Mrs. Park said, and then she stopped. She took a breath that was slow and deliberate, the breath of a woman who had said hard things before and knew the only way through them was directly. Perhaps a year. Perhaps less. The floor didn't move. That was the strange thing. The floor stayed exactly where it was. The kitchen stayed exactly where it was. The light through the window continued doing what it was doing. Everything remained in its place. And yet something had shifted so completely and so permanently that Trisha would not be able to tell you, later, what the kitchen had looked like before Mrs. Park said those words, because the before and the after were two completely different rooms. Perhaps a year. Perhaps less. She was at the birthday party. She didn't decide to go there. She was just suddenly there, the garden, the afternoon light, 8 children running. Min-Ho at the gate when she arrived. "You came." Said like he was checking a fact he needed confirmed. Not "I'm glad you came." Not "I hoped you'd come." Just, checking. Confirming. Like a man arriving at a meeting and opening his notebook to mark something present. "I wanted to do this one myself. This one. Not this year. This one." She came back to the kitchen. Mrs. Park was watching her. "He knows," Trisha said. Not a question. Something in the way every memory was rearranging itself told her the answer before she finished asking it. "Yes," Mrs. Park said. "He has known for over a year." Over a year. She thought about the Tuesday calls. The first one, "I'd been thinking about it for 3 days. I couldn't decide if it was beautiful or sad. Light from stars that didn't exist anymore. Seeing what something left behind after it was already gone." He had been thinking about that for 3 days. An 8-year-old boy had been sitting with that image for 3 days, and when he finally called someone to talk about it he had called her. Her chest did something she didn't have a name for. He asked the doctors to tell him directly, Mrs. Park said. When he was 6. They tried to speak around it the way doctors do with children. He asked again. More specifically. The sound she made was somewhere between a laugh and something that would never be a laugh. He wrote them a list of questions. He brought it to the appointment in his notebook. Trisha looked at the notebook in her hands. Evidence. In case anyone forgets. She put it on the table. She couldn't hold it right now. His father, she said. The words came out careful and small. Has always known. Mrs. Park looked at her cup. From the beginning. He has always known. And there it was. The piece she hadn't had. She thought about Ji-won in the doorway of her studio. Crouching beside his sleeping son. Folding the glasses. Staying crouched there longer than he needed to, looking at Min-Ho's face in the particular way she had seen him look at Min-Ho's face a dozen times and never been able to name. She could name it now. She had thought it was love. It was love. But it was love with knowledge inside it. It was love that knew it was on a clock. It was love trying to memorize a face because some part of him understood that one day the only place that face would exist was inside him. She pressed her fingers against the edge of the table. He's not, she stopped. Tried again. He doesn't seem like a cold man. He seemed. He is not a cold man, Mrs. Park said. Firmly. The firmness of someone correcting a misunderstanding they have had to correct before. He is a man who has already lost everything once. She paused. Min-Ho's mother died the day he was born. Ji-won SSI came home from the hospital with a child and without his wife on the same day. He has spent 8 years loving his son and being terrified of losing him and not knowing how to be both things at the same time. She looked at her tea. So he manages. He organizes. He controls what he can control. He makes sure everything is taken care of. He shows love through the things he can guarantee. A long pause. But there are things that cannot be guaranteed. Trisha was quiet. She thought about lunch. I think it gets quieter. Not easier. Quieter. You learn to live around it. And then something happens and it's loud again for a while. He had been talking about his wife. And he had been talking about Min-Ho. Both at the same time. In the same sentence. She hadn't understood that until right now. Min-Ho understands this, Mrs. Park said. He has understood it for longer than any child should have to. She looked at Trisha directly. He sees his father clearly. He sees what his father needs. And he has been, she stopped. Her hands tightened around the cup. He has been trying to solve it. Before he cannot anymore. The sentence landed. Not loudly. Quietly. The way the heaviest things landed, without noise, just wait. He has been trying to solve it. Before he cannot anymore. Trisha thought about the studio. Min-Ho walking through it with his notebook. The display boards. The red fabrics. The green dress. My mom liked green. Said so quietly. So casually. The way he said most things that mattered, like they were footnotes, like they were minor, like if he said them lightly enough they would be easier to carry. She thought about chess on Wednesday afternoons. The trap set 2 weeks in advance. I've been patient. An 8-year-old teaching himself chess so he would have a reason to sit across from her at a table for an hour every week. She thought about, he needs someone who isn't me. Do you understand? Said to her at the birthday party. On a bench. At the end of the day. With his birthday badge still on and his glasses smudged and his legs too short to reach the ground. He needs someone who isn't me. She had thought it was the observation of an unusually mature child. She had thought it was insight. She had thought it was impressive and slightly heartbreaking in the way that very old thoughts from very young people were heartbreaking. She had not understood that it was a plan. She had not understood that she was sitting in the middle of a plan that an 8-year-old boy had been executing for months. That the gala had not been an accident. That the birthday invitation had not been a child's impulse. That the Tuesday calls and the Wednesday chess and the lunch text and every carefully engineered moment of proximity between her and Ji-won. She pressed her hand over her mouth. He had known. The entire time. Every argument. Every notebook. Every what a coincidence, I have a meeting nearby. Every my dad laughed today, did you see? Every careful, deliberate, patient, impossible thing. He had known he was running out of time. And he had spent that time building something for his father. Not for himself. For his father. The grief came then. Not with warning. Not gradually. It came the way things came when you had been holding them at a distance and the distance suddenly collapsed, all at once, complete, with nowhere to put it. She didn't make a sound. She pressed her fingers to her mouth and she breathed through her nose and she sat in that warm kitchen in that house that Min-Ho had grown up in and she let it move through her because there was nothing else to do with it. Mrs. Park did not speak. She just sat there. Present. Steady. The way people who had been through things knew how to be present in someone else's breaking without trying to stop it. The clock on the kitchen wall marked the seconds. Outside, a car passed on the quiet road. Inside, nothing moved. She drove home slowly. Not because she was being careful. Because she kept having to stop herself from going somewhere in her head and needed the driving to stay in her body. She thought about the astronomy book. Some of those stars might not even exist anymore. We're just seeing the light they left behind. She thought about how he had called her specifically to talk about that. She thought about a boy who had read that and sat with it for 3 days and then picked up the phone and called her, not his father, not Mrs. Park, not a teacher, her. Someone he had known for 4 weeks. Someone he had chosen. She thought about why he had chosen her. She's honest and she isn't impressed by things that aren't real and she has that kind of face that means she's been through something hard and came out the other side anyway. He had told her that himself. Weeks later. Casually. Like it was obvious. She had thought it was a compliment. It was a criteria. He had walked across a ballroom with a notebook full of evidence and he had chosen her, specifically, Because she was the kind of person who could be chosen for this. Who could hold it? Who had already survived her own version of it and come out the other side and kept going. He had looked at her across a gala and he had thought, she's the one. Not for himself. For his father. She pulled over. She didn't plan to. Her hands just did it, turned the wheel, eased the car to the side of the road, stopped. She sat there. The city moved around her. Ordinary Tuesday afternoon. People walking. A delivery van double-parked. A woman pushing a stroller. Everything continuing at its regular pace, unaware. She thought about his voice on the phone. I couldn't decide if it was beautiful or sad. I decided it was both. She thought about you'll come back, right? She thought about he smiles more now. She thought about a child who had been carrying a truth large enough to break most adults, who had carried it for over a year, who had never put it down and asked someone else to hold it, who had instead looked at the time he had left and thought not about himself but about the person he was going to leave behind. Who had made a plan. Who had executed the plan with a notebook and a chess set and Tuesday phone calls and a completely straight face. Who had done all of it because he loved his father and he needed to know his father would not be alone. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. She stayed like that for a long time. She called Yemi from the car. The phone rang twice. Yemi picked up in the middle of something. Trisha could hear voices in the background, a meeting or a dinner, somewhere with people. Trisha? Give me 1 second. The background noise faded. A door closing. Okay. What's wrong? Trisha opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Not because she didn't have words. Because there were too many of them and none of them were right, and saying any of them out loud would make it real in a way it wasn't quite real yet, even now, even sitting on the side of the road with her forehead still warm from the steering wheel. Yemi waited. That was the thing about Yemi. She had known Trisha since before words were always necessary, since before Trisha had learned to put everything in order before she spoke. She knew how to wait. The silence stretched. There's a little boy, Trisha said finally. Her voice came out smaller than she expected. I know, Yemi said quietly. She didn't know. She had met Min-Ho once, at the gala, for 10 minutes. But she knew Trisha. And that was enough to know what was in that sentence. Trisha stopped. He's been doing all of this. All of it. And he knew the whole time. He knew and he never. She stopped again. She looked out the window at the ordinary street. He's 8 years old, she said. Yemi said nothing. He's 8 years old and he spent his time. She couldn't finish it. She didn't need to. Yemi stayed on the line. The afternoon went on around them. The delivery van pulled away. The woman with the stroller turned a corner and disappeared. The city moved at its regular pace. Trisha sat in her car on the side of the road and held the phone and breathed. And somewhere across the city, in a house with a precise garden and a warm kitchen and an astronomy book with notes in the margins, an 8-year-old boy was at a hospital appointment, probably asking the doctors direct questions, probably taking notes, probably managing the whole thing with the particular composure of someone who had decided a long time ago that the only useful response to an impossible situation was to do something about it. He has been trying to solve his father. Before he cannot anymore. Trisha closed her eyes. The light from distant stars. Thousands of years to reach you. And some of them already gone. She made one decision on the side of that road. She would not treat Min-Ho differently. He had chosen her because she was honest. Because she didn't soften things. Because she looked at him like a person and not like something that needed to be managed carefully. She would continue to do exactly that. What she would do differently was show up more. The first dinner happened on a Thursday. She hadn't planned it. She had come to the house to drop off a fabric swatch Min-Ho had asked for. He had become interested in textile weight after seeing her work on the green dress and had requested samples to examine, which she had brought in a small paper bag as if this were a normal thing to do on a Thursday evening. Min-Ho answered the door before she knocked. I saw your car from the window, he said. He took the bag. Looked inside. Which one is the Dupioni? The stiff one. Ivory. He pulled it out and held it up to the hallway light, turning it slowly with both hands, studying the way it caught the light. The texture is interesting. It's not uniform. It's not supposed to be. That's the point. Imperfect on purpose, he said. He said it like he was filing it somewhere. Then he looked up at her. Have you eaten? Min-Ho. Mrs. Park made jollof rice. She blinked. Mrs. Park made. I asked her to learn. I sent her 3 videos. He was already walking back into the house. I told her you were coming over a lot and it seemed polite. She practiced twice. This is the 3rd time. I think she's got it. Trisha stood in the doorway for a moment. Then she came inside. The kitchen table sat 4. They used 3 of the chairs. Mrs. Park's jollof rice was not perfect. The tomato base was slightly sweet and the seasoning was cautious in the way of someone who had learned something from a video rather than from a mother or grandmother. But it was warm and it was made with attention, and Min-Ho watched Trisha take the first bite with the focused expression of someone awaiting a verdict. Well, he said. It's good, Trisha said. Genuinely. Min-Ho looked at Mrs. Park with the satisfaction of a project manager whose team had delivered. Mrs. Park looked quietly pleased. Ji-won ate without commenting on the food. But he ate all of it. And twice during the meal Trisha caught him watching his son across the table. Min-Ho was explaining to Mrs. Park the difference between dupioni and raw silk, using the swatches as demonstration material, holding them up, comparing textures, completely absorbed, and Ji-won's face was doing the thing it did when he thought no one was watching him watch his son. Open. Afraid. Helpless with love. Trisha looked at her rice. After dinner Min-Ho fell asleep on the living room couch before 8 o'clock. Mid-sentence about thread counts, glasses on the cushion beside his head. Ji-won carried him to bed. Trisha waited in the living room. She didn't decide to wait. She just didn't leave. When Ji-won came back he stopped briefly in the doorway when he saw she was still there. Something moved through his face, not surprise exactly. More like something he had been expecting and hadn't known how to ask for. He went to the kitchen. Came back with 2 cups of tea. Set one in front of her and sat down across from her and held his own cup without drinking it. The house was quiet. Outside, the city made its distant sounds. Inside, the lamp in the corner made everything warm and small. Neither of them spoke for a moment. This was the thing she had noticed about Ji-won. He was not uncomfortable with silence. He didn't fill it with noise or performance. He just sat inside it. And somehow that made the silence feel like something shared rather than something avoided. She waited. He looked at his cup. He asked me last week, Ji-won said finally, if I thought the universe was lonely. She was quiet. I said I didn't know. He said he thought it probably wasn't. He said he thought everything in it was connected to everything else, even the things that looked separate. Ji-won turned the cup in his hands. He said the stars that were already gone were still connected to us because we could still see their light. A pause. He was talking about astronomy. I think he was also not talking about astronomy. Trisha looked at him. He does that, Ji-won said. Says 2 things at once. Lets you choose which one to hear. Which one did you hear? Ji-won looked at the middle distance. A long moment. Both. The lamp flickered once, faintly, then held. Mrs. Park told me, Trisha said. Quietly. Not suddenly. Like setting something down carefully rather than dropping it. Ji-won nodded. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look relieved. He looked like a man who had known a conversation was coming and had been deciding for days how to be inside it. She was right to, he said. You knew she told me. I could see it. The way you've been, he stopped. You come more now. You stay longer. You brought fabric samples last week. He looked at her. You don't treat him differently. That was the first thing I noticed. You came back and you didn't use that voice with him. He doesn't need that voice. No. Ji-won set his cup down. He hates it. When people use it he gets very still and very polite and then he finds a reason to leave the room. A pause. He's had to leave a lot of rooms this year. Trisha thought about Min-Ho at the studio. The way he walked in every Wednesday and dropped his bag and set up the chessboard and argued about fabric weight with the confidence of someone who had decided this space was safe. Who had decided she was safe? He chose you, Ji-won said. Not accusing. Not questioning. Just saying it. The gala wasn't, he didn't wander over to you. He had been watching the room. He was looking for someone specific and he found you. He looked at his hands. He told me that night when we got home. He said he had met someone interesting. He said, a brief, complicated pause. He said she says true things. She says true things. Trisha pressed her lips together. He's never said that about anyone before, Ji-won said. The room was quiet. Outside the window a light wind moved through the garden trees. Small sound. Brief. Can I say something true now? Trisha asked. Ji-won looked at her. He doesn't need you to organize things for him, she said. He knows you love him through everything you provide and protect and arrange. He knows. But there is a difference, she stopped. Found the words. There is a difference between knowing something and hearing it. Between seeing it and being told it. She looked at him steadily. He needs to hear it. From you. Out loud. Ji-won's jaw tightened. I know that's not easy for you. It's not about easy. Then what is it about? He was quiet for a long time. The kind of quiet that meant he was not avoiding the question. He was actually looking for the answer and the answer was somewhere he didn't go often. Every time I look at him, he said finally, I see how much time I have left with him. The words came out measured. Controlled. The control of someone being very precise about how much of themselves they release at once. And I want to say everything. I want to, he stopped. His hand on the table pressed flat. But then I look at him and I see her. His mother. The way he tilts his head when he's thinking. The way he laughs at things he finds genuinely funny versus things he finds politely amusing, she did that too. Two completely different laughs. His voice was even. Too even. And I love that. I love that she's in him. And I cannot look at it and I cannot look away from it and I don't know how to do both at the same time. Trisha did not speak. She let it sit. The way he had let things sit for her at lunch, weeks ago. Not filling the space. Just receiving it. My father did the same thing, she said eventually. After my mother died. He loved her so completely that when she was gone the love had nowhere to go. It just stayed inside him. Taking up all the space. She looked at her cup. I watched him disappear for 3 years. Not all at once. Piece by piece. He was still there but he was smaller every time I looked. Because the love had no exit and it was eating him from the inside. Ji-won was watching her. He came back eventually, she said. But those 3 years, she shook her head. I needed him in those 3 years. I was 12 and I needed my father and he was there and not there at the same time and that is its own kind of loss. She looked at Ji-won. You still have somewhere to put it. You still have a son who is here and awake and present. Don't make him watch you be there and not there at the same time. He's carrying enough already. Something moved through Ji-won's face. Not breaking exactly. More like a wall developing a crack. Something that had been held in one position for a very long time beginning, slowly, to shift. He's trying to take care of me, Ji-won said. The words came out flat. The specific flatness of someone feeling too much to allow any texture into it. I know, Trisha said. He is 8 years old. Ji-won looked at the table. He is 8 years old and he is managing this better than I am and he is worried about me and I am supposed to be, he stopped. His father, Trisha said. Gently. Yes. You are his father. That's not in question. She leaned forward slightly. But being his father right now doesn't mean protecting him from the sadness of it. He already knows. He's known longer than you realize. She paused. Being his father right now means letting him see that you love him enough to say it out loud. That he doesn't have to read it in everything you do. That he can just hear it. Simply. From you. Ji-won looked at her. His eyes were very dark and very direct, and the composure was still there, but it was thin now, thin the way ice went thin in spring, still holding but changed underneath. How do you do it? He said. You know what's coming and you still come in here and argue with him about chess and fabric weight and whether pineapple belongs in civilization. How do you sit across from him and not? I cry in the car, she said. Simply. Every time. I sit in the car outside and I cry and then I come inside. He looked at her. She held his gaze. And he never sees it? Ji-won asked. He never sees it. She paused. But I think he knows. He's Min-Ho. He knows everything. A beat. I think he appreciates that I do it in the car. Something happened in Ji-won's face then. Not the outline of a smile. Not the controlled almost expression she had seen at the birthday party, in the garden, across restaurant tables. Something realer than that. Something that had been a long time behind the wall and had finally found a gap. His eyes were bright. He looked away. At the window. At the dark garden outside. When he looked back, the brightness was still there, but he had steadied himself around it. I'm not good at this, he said quietly. I know. I don't mean, I know what I feel. I've always known what I feel. He looked at his hands. I just don't know how to take it out and show it. It always seems, he searched for the word. Unsafe, she offered. He looked at her. A long moment. Yes, he said quietly. Unsafe. She nodded. She understood that. She understood it from the inside. The thing about Min-Ho, she said, is that he already knows. He's not waiting to find out if you love him. He knows. He has always known. She paused. He's just waiting to hear it. There's a difference. He's not uncertain. He's just waiting for you to say it out loud so he can stop carrying the weight of knowing it without hearing it. Ji-won was very still. She let the silence hold. Outside, the wind moved through the garden again. Longer this time. The lamp made its small warm light. He counted your laughs, Trisha said. At the birthday party. He told me. He said you laughed twice and he noticed both times, and he told me you looked like a different person when you did. She looked at Ji-won steadily. He is counting your laughs. He is counting the good days. He is storing them. Her voice was even. She made it stay even. Give him something to store. Ji-won pressed his hand over his mouth. He sat like that for a moment. The wall didn't come down. But the crack was real now. Visible. And on the other side of it, she could feel the weight of everything he had been holding in the exact position it had been in for 8 years, enormous, and terrified, and full of a love that had never once been the problem. The only problem was the silence it lived in. He lowered his hand. He looked at her with an expression she had not seen on him before. Not composed. Not managed. Just present. Raw, in the way of someone who had finally stopped spending energy on the architecture of their own containment. Thank you, he said. Not formal. Not professional. Just that. She picked up her cup. Drank. Set it down. Go to bed, she said. You have a son who needs a father tomorrow. Not a perfect one. Just one who shows up. He looked at her for one more moment. Then he nodded. And she knew, not from anything he said, but from the way he stood and the way he looked one more time toward the hallway where his son was sleeping and the way his hand rested briefly on the back of the chair before he let it go. That something had changed. Not everything. Not all at once. But something real. Something that would still be there in the morning. Mrs. Park noticed at 7:15. Ji-won's coat was still on the hook. His briefcase still by the door. The coffee she had set on at 6:30 was untouched. She poured it into a fresh cup to keep it warm. Sat down. folded her hands, and allowed herself one quiet moment of something that felt very close to hope. Ji-won stood outside Min-ho's door for longer than he needed to. Not because he didn't know what he wanted to say. He had been thinking about it since Thursday night, since Trisha had sat across from him in the living room and said give him something to store with the particular steadiness of someone who knew exactly what they were asking and was asking it anyway. He knew what he wanted to say. He just hadn't said it before. Not like this. Not directly. And there was a specific fear in doing something for the first time that you should have done years ago, not just the fear of the thing itself but the weight of all the time it hadn't been done pressing down on the moment when you finally tried. He knocked. Min-ho was on the floor. Astronomy book open. Notes spread in a radius around him that suggested a system only he fully understood. His glasses were slightly crooked and his hair was doing something on one side that happened when he slept on it and hadn't noticed yet. He looked up. He looked at his father in the doorway. Then he looked at the window, where the morning light was the particular quality of early Saturday, unhurried and clean. Then back at his father. "You're home," he said. "I'm home. It's Saturday." He said it the way a scientist states a variable. Neutral. Noting it. "I know what day it is." Min-ho studied him for one more moment with those clear, perceptive eyes that missed nothing and had never missed anything. Then he looked down at his papers. He gathered them into a loose stack, carefully, not hurriedly, and moved them to the side. He made space. Ji-won came in and sat on the floor beside his son. For a while they just looked at the book. Min-ho walked him through the notes and the margins the way he walked through everything, with the seriousness of someone presenting findings and the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved the subject. He had been working on a theory about neutron stars that he explained in careful detail, occasionally tapping the relevant diagram with his finger for emphasis. Ji-won listened. Actually listened. Not the half-present listening of a man with other things running in the background, the full kind, the kind where you asked questions because you wanted to know the answers. "Wait," Ji-won said. "If a neutron star is denser than a black hole, why doesn't it?" "It's not denser than a black hole. A black hole has infinite density by definition. A neutron star is just the densest thing that still technically exists as matter." Min-ho looked at him over his glasses. "Appa. We've talked about black holes. We've talked about many things. And you still don't remember the density distinction." "I remember most of it. The density distinction is important. It's the whole point." Min-ho tapped the page. "Write it down if you need to." "I won't tell anyone." Ji-won looked at his son. Min-ho looked back at him with the expression of someone making a generous offer. "I don't need to write it down," Ji-won said. "Okay. Then tell me, what's the difference between a neutron star and a white dwarf?" A pause. "Min-ho. Take your time." "I'll wait." Ji-won looked at the ceiling briefly. "The density. Specifically. The neutron star is denser." Min-ho nodded with the magnanimous patience of a very small professor. "Correct. See? You had it. You just needed prompting." He turned a page. "I think you'd be good at this if you actually studied it. You have a logical mind. You just apply it to finance instead of things that matter. Finance matters. Finance matters to finance." Min-ho turned another page. "Stars matter to everything." Ji-won was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Where did you get that from?" "The book." "Which one?" Min-ho glanced at him sideways. "You, actually. You said something like it once. About foundations. That some things mattered to systems and some things mattered regardless of systems." He looked back at the book. "I thought it applied." Ji-won looked at his son. Min-ho did not look up. He was tracing a diagram with one finger, following the life cycle of a star from formation to collapse, his expression absorbed and quiet. At some point the book was set to the side. Not by decision. It just happened the way things happened in rooms where two people had run out of subject and hadn't yet moved to the next thing. The notes were stacked. The pen was capped. Outside the window the Saturday morning continued without them, birds somewhere, a distant car, the particular unhurried quality of a weekend. Min-Ho sat with his back against the bed, legs stretched out in front of him, looking at the ceiling. Ji-won sat beside him. The silence was comfortable. That was the thing about Min-Ho, he had never been uncomfortable with silence either. He had gotten that from somewhere. "This is nice," Min-Ho said eventually. To the ceiling. "Yes. You should do this more. Not work on Saturdays." He said it casually, not as a complaint. As an observation. "You're better in the mornings than you think you are. Before the emails start." "Am I?" "You're more," Min-Ho considered. "Present. In the mornings. Before everything requires something from you." A pause. "I like morning you." Ji-won looked at his son's profile. The line of his nose, the set of his jaw. The things that were Ji-won's and the things that were hers, mixed together in this particular face, in this particular person. He looked for a moment longer than he usually allowed himself. He did not look away. "Min-Ho," he said. I want to tell you something." Min-Ho was quiet for a beat. Then, "Should I be taking notes?" Ji-won paused. "No." "Okay." A pause. "This feels serious." "It is." Another pause. Shorter. Min-Ho shifted slightly and pushed his glasses up and then settled again, looking at the ceiling, giving his father the particular quality of his full attention while appearing to be doing nothing at all. It was a skill he had. Making people feel heard without making them feel watched. "I've been thinking," Ji-won said, "about how he stopped. Outside, a bird. About how I show things," he continued. I make sure things are taken care of. The right schools. The right doctors. Everything in order. I thought if everything was right then you would know." Min-Ho didn't say anything. Ji-won looked at his hands. "I'm not good at," he stopped again. The sentence had seemed clearer in the hallway. In here, next to his son, the words kept losing their shape. "My father wasn't," he didn't say things either. "He worked. He provided. And I knew he loved me because of what he did, not because of what he said. So I thought that was how it worked. That what you did was the message." Silence. "I think I was wrong about that," Ji-won said. Min-Ho turned his head. Just slightly. Enough to see his father from the corner of his eye without fully looking at him. "There are things I should have said," Ji-won continued. "Things I felt and didn't say because I thought you could see them in other ways. And maybe you could. But that's not," he pressed his hands flat on the floor. "That's not the same." Min-Ho was very still. "When you were born," Ji-won said, and then he stopped completely. The room waited. "When you were born," he said again, more slowly, I was terrified. Not of you. Of how much," he exhaled. "Of how much you meant. Already. You were 1 day old and you already meant more than I knew how to hold." He looked at the window. "And I thought if I said it, if I put it into words, it would become real in a way I couldn't manage. That it would be too large and I wouldn't know what to do with it." Min-Ho said nothing. He was not looking at the ceiling anymore. He was looking at his father. Watching him the way he watched things that mattered, carefully, fully, without interruption. "Sometimes I look at you," Ji-won said, "and I see her. Your mother." His voice remained level. It cost something to keep it level. "The way you tilt your head when something interests you. She did that. The way you laugh at things you find genuinely funny, she had 2 laughs too. One for polite things and one for real things." A pause. "Yours are exactly hers." A long silence. "I love that," Ji-won said. "I love that she's in you. And for a long time I couldn't look at it because," he stopped. "Because looking at it meant feeling all of it at once and I didn't," the sentence didn't finish. Min-Ho was very quiet. His hands were in his lap. He wasn't performing composure anymore. Trisha had noted in Min-Ho that his composure was usually a choice, an active thing, something he put on. Right now it was different. He was just still. Present. Listening to his father the way you listened when you had been waiting for something for a long time and it was finally coming and you didn't want to move in case it stopped. I should have told you, Ji-won said. I should have said it from the beginning. From the first day. Every day. He looked at his son. Directly. Without flinching. I love you, Min-Ho. Min-Ho didn't move. Not because of what you do or how you think or how remarkable you are, though you are. Ji-won's voice was very steady and very quiet and it was costing him something audible to keep it that way. Not because you carry her in you, though I'm grateful every day that you do. Because you are you. Because you came into my life on the hardest day of my life and you made it. He stopped. His jaw was tight. You made it something worth continuing. The room was very still. Min-Ho did not cry immediately. He looked at his father's face for a long time. Checking that it was real. That it wasn't something he would have to decode or interpret or find hidden inside an action. And then for 30 seconds, just 30 seconds, the analyst was gone. The strategist was gone. The boy with the notebook and the evidence and the long-term plan and the composure that had held through hospital appointments and difficult Tuesdays and every moment he had chosen to be brave instead of afraid. All of it was gone. What was left was just a child. 8 years old. Glasses in his hands. Looking at his father with the open, undefended face of someone who had not expected that hearing a thing they already knew could feel this big. His voice, when it came, was small in a way it had never been before. I knew it, he said. A breath. Unsteady. I just needed you to say it. Out loud. Just once. Like that. Ji-won reached over and put his hand on his son's head. The way he had at the birthday party when he thought no one was watching. That same gesture, quiet, complete, like touching something precious. Min-Ho leaned sideways into his father's shoulder. He didn't say anything. Ji-won put his arm around his son and held him. Not carefully. Not managed. Completely. The way you held someone when you finally stopped pretending the fear wasn't there and decided that love was more important than the safety of not saying it. They sat like that. Outside the window the morning continued. Unhurried. Ordinary Saturday light coming through the curtains and lying across the floor in long pale strips. After a while Min-Ho said, into his father's shoulder, voice slightly muffled and slightly unsteady and still, even now, entirely himself. For the record. The neutron star thing. I already knew you knew it. I just wanted to see how long you'd let me correct you. Ji-won made a sound. Half laugh. Half something else. The kind of sound that could only exist in the space between grief and love when both of them were present at the same time. I know, he said. I've been doing it for 2 years. A pause. With a lot of things. I know that too. Min-Ho was quiet for a moment. Appa. Yes. Don't stop. The Saturdays. His voice was very quiet now. Don't go back to working. Ji-won tightened his arm. I won't, he said. Outside the birds continued. The light moved slowly across the floor the way light did on unhurried mornings. Mrs. Park moved quietly in the kitchen below, not coming upstairs, giving them the particular gift of a woman who understood when a room needed to be left alone. And in that room, on that floor, with the astronomy book set aside and the notes in their careful stack and the glasses sitting lensless on the carpet. A father and his son sat together in the ordinary extraordinary silence of people who have finally said the true thing and found that the world did not end when they said it. That it was still there. That it had been waiting for them the whole time. It started with small things. Not grand gestures. Not declarations. Small things that she would not have noticed if she hadn't already been paying attention. The way he remembered things she mentioned once and never repeated. She had said offhandedly one time that she preferred her coffee without sugar because sweet things in the morning felt like a lie. 3 weeks later he had come to her studio to collect Min-Ho and Mrs. Park had sent tea in a flask and when Trisha reached for the sugar out of habit Ji-won said, quietly, you don't take sugar, not as a correction, just as a fact he had stored, and then said nothing else about it. She had stood there with the sugar in her hand for a moment. Then she put it down. The way he texted. Not often. Never casually. When Ji-won texted, it was always specific, an article he thought she would find useful, a question about something she had mentioned, once a photograph of a building near his office that had a textile installation on the exterior that he thought she would want to see. No context. Just the photograph. Then nothing. She had stared at that photograph for longer than she needed to. The way he looked at her when he thought Min-ho was distracting her. She had caught it twice. Just a look. Level and quiet and containing something she didn't have a name for yet. Not longing exactly. More like attention. The specific quality of attention you gave things that mattered. She noticed all of it. She didn't say anything about any of it. The call happened on a Wednesday evening. She was at her work table going over invoices when her phone lit up. Ji-won's name. She looked at it for one ring longer than necessary before answering. Hello. Have you seen the piece about Amaran Wosu? Not quite a question. In this month's business magazine. She put her pen down. No. Which one? The business one. The main one. A pause. I'll send you the name. I can't remember the exact title of the magazine. She waited. It's the one with the blue cover this month, he said. She pressed her lips together. That narrows it down. It's a well-known publication. A pause. She could hear, faintly, the specific quality of a man who had started a sentence with confidence and was now not entirely sure how it was going. The article is about a designer. She lost her main investor and rebuilt the brand in 14 months. I thought, he stopped. She waited. I thought it was interesting, he finished. Why did you think of me? A pause. A longer pause than the question required. The approach she used, he said carefully. The way she restructured the business. It reminded me of something you said at lunch. About building something that outlasted its original reason for existing. She had said that. Months ago. About her mother's fabric brand, about turning grief into something that kept going. She had said it once, in passing, and moved on. He had kept it. You could have texted to tell me about it. A shorter pause this time. Yes, he said. I could have done that. Neither of them said anything for a moment. She could hear him breathing. Steady. Slightly careful. The breathing of a man who was being very precise about something. How is Min-ho? She asked. Not because she didn't know, she had seen him 2 days ago, but because it was the easiest sentence available and she needed one. He reorganized Mrs. Park's spice cabinet this morning, Ji-won said. Alphabetically. She didn't ask him to. He said the previous system was emotionally unsatisfying. She laughed. Ji-won was quiet for a moment after she laughed. The particular quality of someone listening to a sound they wanted to hear again. He misses you on the days you don't come, Ji-won said. Carefully. He doesn't say it. But he checks the time after 4 o'clock on the days you usually come. Just checks it. Doesn't say anything. She was quiet. I noticed, Ji-won added. Even more carefully. Like the sentence had 2 meanings and he was only claiming responsibility for one of them. She understood the other one. She didn't say so. They talked for 40 minutes. About the article. About Amaran Wosu's approach to rebuilding something from almost nothing. About a building Ji-won was considering for a Kongtech expansion that had structural problems he found philosophically interesting. About whether Min-ho's alphabetical spice system was practical or purely theoretical. At no point did either of them say anything that was not entirely reasonable to say. At no point did either of them say the thing that was sitting in the middle of the conversation like a piece of furniture they were both walking around. When they hung up, she sat with her phone in her hand. She thought about the sugar. You don't take sugar. Said quietly, like something he had known for a long time and was only now finding a use for. She thought about the photograph of the building. No context. Just, I saw this and thought of you. She thought about he checks the time after 4 o'clock on the days you usually come. She put her phone face down on the work table. She picked up her pen. She put it down again. She didn't name it that night. She was not ready to name it yet. Naming it made it real in a way that real things could be lost, and she had decided a long time ago to be careful about that. So she didn't name it. She just noticed it, the way you noticed weather, constantly, peripherally, without deciding to. 2 days later Min-Ho arrived at the studio at 4 o'clock. He set up the chessboard without being asked. They played for 20 minutes in comfortable silence before he said, without looking up from the board. You and my dad talk on the phone now. Sometimes. Wednesday evenings. He moved a pawn. He goes to his study. He doesn't usually go to his study in the evenings. A pause. He also started reading fashion magazines. Trisha looked up. Min-Ho was studying the board with great concentration. Business ones. With fashion articles in them. He moved another piece. He left one on the kitchen table. I didn't say anything. A beat. I just noticed. She looked at this child. He glanced up at her briefly over his glasses. The glance of someone checking that their evidence had landed. Then back to the board. Your move, he said. She moved a piece without really seeing it. Min-Ho, she said. You know what you've been doing. This whole time. The gala. The lunch. The Wednesday visits. She looked at him. Do you know how? She stopped. Found the right word. How much it means. Min-Ho was quiet for a moment. He set his piece down. He was lonely, he said simply. Even with me there. He would come home and have dinner and put me to bed and then sit in the living room by himself and I could hear the quiet from my room. He looked at the board. It's a specific kind of quiet. When someone is alone and they've been alone for a long time and they've forgotten what it felt like to not be. Trisha did not speak. I'm not scared of a lot of things, Min-Ho said. He said it matter-of-factly. But that quiet scared me. He looked up at her. I don't want him to go back to that. She held his gaze. He won't, she said. I promise you. Min-Ho looked at her for a moment with those clear, serious eyes. Checking, the way he always checked. Then he nodded. Once. The nod of someone marking something confirmed. He picked up his piece. Then, like it was nothing, like it was the most ordinary thing, he leaned sideways until his shoulder was against her arm. And stayed there. She didn't move. The afternoon light came through the studio window and lay across them both, warm and unhurried, and outside the city went about its business and inside nothing moved. She sat there with this boy leaning against her arm. And she thought about a man who sent articles with page numbers. Who remembered she didn't take sugar. Who checked the time after 4 o'clock on days she usually came, and didn't say anything, and Ji-won had noticed, and told her, in the only way he currently knew how. She thought about the specific quiet Min-Ho had described. She thought about not wanting him to go back to that. She thought, neither do I. And there it was. Not loud. Not sudden. Quiet, the way the truest things were quiet, the way they arrived not as revelations but as recognitions. As things you had already known, finding the right moment to be known out loud. She loved him. Not despite the careful distances and the controlled silences and the way he felt things too deeply to show them easily. Because of all of it. Because underneath all of it was a man who sent articles with page numbers and remembered small things and stood in doorways watching his son with the face of someone who understood exactly what it meant to love something you were terrified of losing. She knew that face. She had been wearing it for weeks. Min-Ho shifted slightly against her arm. Getting comfortable. Entirely unbothered. She looked at the top of his head. She thought, you brilliant, impossible child. She thought, you were right. She didn't say any of it out loud. But the afternoon light lay across them both, and somewhere across the city a man was probably in his study right now, possibly reading a fashion magazine, definitely not admitting to anyone why. And that, she thought, was the most Ji-won thing she had ever imagined. It didn't happen all at once. That was the thing nobody told you about losing someone slowly. You didn't lose them in one moment. You lost them in 100 small ones, each one so quiet you almost missed it, each one leaving a gap so slight you almost convinced yourself it wasn't there. The first thing Trisha noticed was the chess. Min-Ho stopped winning. Not because she had gotten better. Because 20 minutes into a game he would slow down. His hand would rest on a piece without moving it. His eyes would lose the particular focused quality they had when he was 3 moves ahead and working through the sequence. He would look at the board and then look at the window and then look back at the board. "Your move," she would say. Lightly. "I know." A pause. "I'm thinking." She let him think. But she had played enough games with him to know the difference between Min-Ho thinking and Min-Ho tired. Min-Ho thinking was electric and slightly impatient. Min-Ho tired was still. Too still. She didn't say anything about it. She just started bringing tea without being asked. Started making sure the studio was warm before he arrived. Started letting him win in ways he couldn't quite detect, which was difficult because he detected most things, but she was learning. The Tuesday voice notes changed. They had always been long. Min-Ho treated them like phone calls broken into pieces, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, once 11 minutes on the subject of whether the solar system had a personality and if so what that personality was. She had kept every one of them without deciding to. In October the notes got shorter. Not the content. The content was still entirely Min-Ho, precise, funny, occasionally veering into territory that made her stop whatever she was doing and just listen. But the length changed. 3 minutes. 2. Sometimes she would hear him pause mid-sentence and the pause was slightly too long and then he would continue, not quite where he had left off. One Tuesday morning a note arrived that was 40 seconds. "I've been thinking about something you said. About your mother's fabrics. You said you kept them because you couldn't give them away." A pause. Longer than usual. "I think that's right. Some things you keep. Not because you use them. Just because they're yours." A shorter pause. "Okay. That's it. See you Wednesday." She listened to it 3 times. Then she put her phone in her bag and went into the small back room of her studio and stood there for 2 minutes with her hand pressed flat against the wall. Then she came back out. Ji-won noticed the stairs. Min-Ho had always taken them fast. The specific fast of a child who found walking upstairs at a normal pace structurally inefficient. 2 at a time when he was feeling ambitious. Hand barely touching the banister. One evening in November Ji-won was in the hallway when Min-Ho came down for dinner. He came down 1 step at a time. Hand on the banister. Not dramatically. Not making anything of it. Just 1 step. Then the next. Then the next. Ji-won watched him from the hallway. He didn't say anything. He walked to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water and set them on the table and stood at the counter with his back to the room for a moment. Then he turned around when Min-Ho came in and said, "Mrs. Park made bibimbap. Is there enough egg?" "There's enough egg. Last time there wasn't enough egg. I told her." Min-Ho sat down. "Good. The egg ratio matters." He picked up his chopsticks. "What are you standing there for? Sit down." Ji-won sat down. He watched his son eat. Min-Ho ate with the focused attention he brought to things he enjoyed, commenting on the egg-to-rice ratio with the seriousness of someone filing a report. He made Ji-won try a specific combination. He argued that Mrs. Park's version was actually better than the restaurant version because she used better gochujang and the restaurant was coasting on reputation. He was entirely himself. Ji-won watched him the whole time. After dinner when Min-Ho had gone back upstairs, slowly, 1 step at a time, not looking back, Ji-won sat at the empty table. He sat there for a long time. He did not move the dishes. He did not check his phone. He just sat in the kitchen where his son had just been arguing about egg ratios, in the specific silence of a room that had recently been full of someone, and he pressed both hands flat on the table and breathed. Trisha found him like that 20 minutes later. She had come to return Min-Ho's chess set, left at the studio again. She stood in the kitchen doorway. He looked up. Neither of them said anything. She came in and set the chess set on the counter and sat down across from him. The kitchen was warm. The remains of dinner were still on the table. He came downstairs one step at a time tonight, Ji-won said. She was quiet. He didn't say anything about it. Ji-won looked at his hands. He argued about the egg ratio for 10 minutes and didn't say anything about it. That's Min-Ho, she said. Yes. A pause. That's Min-Ho. The clock on the wall. The distant sound of the city. I keep thinking, Ji-won said, that I need to memorize things. The way he argues. The way he pushes his glasses up before he says something he thinks is important. He looked at the table. The way he says appa when he wants something versus when he just wants to talk. They sound different. I've been trying to memorize the difference. Trisha looked at him. She did not say anything because there was nothing to say. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. He looked at her hand on his. He turned his hand over and held it. They sat like that in the kitchen for a long time. Not talking. Just present. Two people who both understood that some things could not be fixed, and the only honest response to that was to stay. The first time Min-Ho let his fear show, it was a Wednesday afternoon in December. They had given up on chess. His hands tired too quickly now and he found it frustrating, which he managed by declaring chess philosophically overrated and switching to conversation, which he was better at anyway. They were sitting in the studio. Min-Ho was on the couch, a blanket over his legs, the astronomy book in his lap. Trisha was at her work table, not really working, just present. He had been quiet for a while. The comfortable kind, she thought. Then he said, Trisha. Do you think, he stopped. She looked up. He was looking at the book. His finger was on a page but he wasn't reading it. He was somewhere else. Do you think it hurts? He asked. When a star goes out. She was very still. I don't mean physically, he said quickly. I know it doesn't feel anything. I just mean, he paused. I just mean, does it happen fast? Or does it know? Before. The studio was very quiet. She put down what she was holding. She came over and sat on the edge of the couch beside him. I think, she said carefully, that the star doesn't worry about going out. It just shines. As completely as it can. Until it can't. Min-Ho looked at the page. And then the light keeps going, she said. For thousands of years. All the way to someone who needed it. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he closed the book. I'm not scared, he said. The way he said it told her he was saying it because he needed to hear himself say it. I just don't want to leave things unfinished. What things? He looked at her. Those clear eyes behind the glasses. Him, he said simply. She held his gaze. He's not unfinished, she said. You've done everything. More than anyone should have had to do. She held his gaze. He has the Saturdays now. He has me. He has everything you built for him. A pause. You can let it be enough. It is enough. Min-Ho looked at her for a long moment. Something moved through his face. Not relief exactly. Something quieter than that. The specific quality of a child who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and has just been told, by someone he trusts, that he can put it down now. He nodded once. Then he leaned his head back against the cushion and looked at the ceiling. I'm tired, he said. Matter of fact. Just reporting it. I know. Not of, he gestured vaguely. Just. Tired. I know, she said again. She sat with him until he fell asleep. It didn't take long. She sat there after he was asleep too. Looking at his face. The glasses slightly crooked. The astronomy book closed on his chest, rising and falling. She stayed until Ji-won came. In January Min-Ho stopped coming to the studio. Not by decision. By accumulation. The hospital stays got longer. The good days got fewer. Ji-won moved his entire office into the hospital, so he was there when Min-Ho woke up and there when he fell asleep. Trisha came every day. Some days Min-Ho talked. Those days were gifts. He would argue about something, deliver a verdict on something, ask her a question that had clearly been waiting since the last time he had enough energy to ask it. He sent one final voice note in late January, 2 minutes long, which she did not listen to for 3 days after she received it because some part of her understood that listening to it meant something she wasn't ready for. When she finally listened, it was just his voice, slightly slower than usual, saying, "I've been thinking. The thing about honest people is they're harder to find than intelligent ones. Intelligence is common. Honesty takes something else." A pause. "I think you're both. I think he knows that too. He just needed time." Another pause. A shorter one. "Okay. That's it." That was the last one. She didn't know it was the last one when she received it. That was the thing. Nobody knew. That was what made it what it was. The last night, though nobody called it that, nobody knew to call it that, the three of them were together in the hospital room. The lights were low. The room was warm. Min-Ho had been drifting in and out of sleep all evening. Ji-won sat in the chair beside the bed, his son's hand in both of his, not reading, not looking at his phone. Just there. Trisha sat on the other side, close enough that Min-Ho could see her when he opened his eyes. He opened his eyes near midnight. He looked at his father first. Then at Trisha. Then back at his father. "Appa." His voice was quiet. Slower than usual. Still his. "I'm here." A pause. "You know how I always said I argued better than you?" Ji-won's jaw was tight. "You always did." Something moved across Min-Ho's face. Small and warm. "Yeah." He looked at the ceiling. "You're going to be okay." Ji-won could not speak. His grip on his son's hand tightened. "Trisha's going to be annoying sometimes," Min-Ho said. Not looking at her. Looking at the ceiling, like he was reading from something written there. "But she's honest. You need that." Trisha pressed her knuckles hard against her mouth. "And when you feel guilty," his voice was very quiet now. The quietest she had ever heard it. "Don't. I had a really good time." A pause. "And even now, even here, even in this room with the low lights and the machines and the specific silence of a hospital at midnight, the warmth was still in his voice. Still him. Still entirely him. Better than most people." He closed his eyes. Ji-won pressed his son's hand against his forehead and held it there. He didn't let go. Min-Ho was gone before morning. Quietly. The way he had done most things that mattered, without drama, without announcement, simply and completely. The nurse came at 5:17. Ji-won did not move. He was still holding his son's hand. He had been holding it all night. He sat in the chair beside the bed and he held his son's hand, and when the nurse spoke to him gently he looked at her and nodded and then looked back at his son. He reached up with one hand and straightened Min-Ho's glasses. They had slipped slightly to one side in the night. He straightened them carefully. Gently. The way you adjusted something that needed to stay right. Then he put his hand back over his son's. Trisha stood in the corner of the room. She did not go to Ji-won. She understood that this was not the moment for that. This moment was his. His and Min-Ho's. The last private thing between them. She watched Ji-won sit beside his son in the early morning light coming through the hospital blinds, holding his hand, not speaking, not moving. Just there. The way he had always been there. The way Min-Ho had always known he would be. After a long time Ji-won said, very quietly, to his son. "I'm here." The way he had always answered. Even now. Even here. "I'm here." Trisha pressed her back against the wall and looked at the ceiling and breathed through her nose and let the grief do what it needed to do silently because the room belonged to them and she was only a witness to the most private thing she had ever seen. The grief afterward was not elegant. It was large and shapeless, and it had no manners, and it did not wait for convenient moments. It arrived in the middle of ordinary things, Ji-won standing in the kitchen reaching for a cup and stopping because Min-Ho had an opinion about which cups were structurally superior. Trisha in her studio reaching for the chess set that was still on the shelf where she had put it. Mrs. Park setting the table for 3 before she caught herself. Ji-won did not go back to the office for 2 weeks. He did not speak much. Not because he had closed back up. He had not closed back up. He had simply used everything he had and needed time to find more. Trisha understood the difference. She came every day. She did not try to fix it. She did not try to fill the silence with the right words because there were no right words, and she had enough respect for what he was carrying to know that. She just came. She sat with him. She made tea he didn't always drink. She was there when he woke up and there when the evenings got long and there when the grief came in waves at inconvenient moments in the middle of otherwise ordinary things. It was the only true thing she knew how to offer. It was enough. Yemi came from Lagos on the 4th day. She arrived with food and said almost nothing and cried openly, which somehow made it easier for everyone else to cry too. She stayed a week. She left without making it a thing. On the last evening before Yemi flew home, she sat with Trisha in the studio and said, "He would have liked this. Knowing you were both going to be okay." Trisha looked at the shelf where the chess set sat. "Yes," she said. "He would have." 3 weeks after the funeral, Mrs. Park found Trisha in the hallway outside Min-Ho's room. The door was closed. Trisha was just standing there. Not going in. Not leaving. Mrs. Park stood beside her for a moment. Then she said, "He left something." Trisha looked at her. "For G1SSI, Mrs. Park said." Her voice was steady in the way of a woman who had decided to be steady for this. "He asked me to help him. In the last weeks. When he had enough energy in the mornings." She looked at the closed door. "He was very methodical about it. He had notes. A breath. He made several recordings. On his tablet. He labeled them carefully." She paused. "He said his father would know when to open each one." Trisha stood very still. She thought about the Tuesday notes. The short ones. The 40-second one. The last one she hadn't known was the last one. She thought about a boy in the mornings when his energy was highest, sitting up against his pillows with a tablet and a glass of water and notes he had prepared. Methodical. Careful. His last project. His last plan. Alone. So that nobody would try to stop him or help him or make it into something he needed to manage for someone else. His final act of love done entirely in private. He has been trying to solve his father. Before he cannot anymore. She pressed her hand against the wall. She stood there for a moment. Then she said, "Don't give them to him yet." Mrs. Park looked at her. "Not yet," Trisha said. "He's not ready yet." A pause. "He'll know when." Mrs. Park nodded. She understood. The first month Ji-won moved through the house like a man learning to walk in a place that had rearranged itself overnight. Everything was the same. That was the strange part. The kitchen was the same. The garden was the same. Min-Ho's room was exactly as he had left it, glasses on the nightstand, astronomy book open on the floor to the last page he had been reading, notes in the margins in his careful handwriting. Ji-won did not close the door. He did not touch anything. He just left it the way it was, the way you left a sentence unfinished because finishing it meant something you weren't ready for. He went back to work after 2 weeks because the silence of the house during the day was a different kind of weight than the silence of an office. At least in the office the silence had a reason. Trisha came every evening. Not always for long. Sometimes just an hour. She would come and sit in the kitchen and make tea, and sometimes they talked and sometimes they didn't, and both were fine. She had learned, in the months of knowing him, that Ji-won did not need to be filled. He needed to be accompanied. So she accompanied him. One evening, 6 weeks after the funeral, she arrived to find him sitting on the floor of the living room. Not collapsed. Not dramatic. Just, sitting on the floor. back against the couch. Lights low. She put her bag down. She sat on the floor beside him. He looked at her. Something in his face that was too tired for composure and too honest for management. I keep starting sentences, he said. In my head. That start with Min-Ho would, he stopped. And then I remember. She looked at the floor. He would have had something to say about everything, Ji-won said. About me going back to work. About the way I've been, he paused. He would have had a notebook entry about it. Filed under, Appa being predictable. She made a sound. Somewhere between a laugh and something that wasn't. Ji-won looked at her when she made that sound. And something shifted in his face, not healing, not yet, but the first small movement toward it. Like a man remembering that the people still here were also worth looking at. He chose well, Ji-won said quietly. When he chose you. She held his gaze. He always did, she said. They sat on the floor together for a long time. It did not happen quickly after that. But it happened honestly. Ji-won stopped being careful with her the way he had been careful with everyone for years, not because he decided to, but because he had simply run out of the energy required to maintain distance from the person who had been sitting on his kitchen floor for 6 weeks making tea he sometimes forgot to drink. He showed up at her studio one evening unannounced. She looked up from her work table. I don't want to keep being careful with you, he said. She put down what she was holding. Then don't, she said. They took it piece by piece. Slowly. With the specific tenderness of two people who understood loss from the inside and had chosen each other anyway, eyes completely open. They were married 16 months after Min-Ho passed. Small ceremony. Close people only. Mrs. Park in the front row. Yemi beside her, already crying before it started. Ji-won's eyes were bright in a way that was happy and grieving at exactly the same time. Because grief and joy were not opposites, they had learned it from a boy who had known it before either of them did. After the ceremony, before the dinner, Ji-won went to a quiet room alone. Mrs. Park had given him the tablet 3 days earlier. She had come to him in the kitchen and set it on the table and said simply, he left these for you. He said you would know when. And then she had walked out. He had held the tablet for a long time without opening it. He had waited for the wedding. He sat down now and opened it. Min-Ho had labeled them carefully in a list on the home screen. For a lonely day. For your wedding day. For when you blame yourself. For no reason in particular. He opened, for your wedding day. The screen showed Min-Ho sitting up in bed, slightly propped on pillows. Small glasses. Hair neat. He had made some effort. Behind him, soft light through the hospital window. He looked directly at the camera with the expression of someone who had decided exactly what they wanted to say and had decided to say it well. Appa. Ji-won's eyes filled immediately. Okay. First of all, she actually married you. A pause for effect. I was not 100% sure about that. So congratulations. To you specifically. For pulling that off. A sound broke from Ji-won. Half laugh. Half sob. Second, you look very handsome today. Probably. I'm saying probably because I cannot see you. But statistically, you look handsome on most days. A beat. I have documented evidence. It's in the notebook. Page 3. The gala woman confirmed it under questioning. It's official. Ji-won pressed his hand over his mouth. Third. Min-Ho's voice shifted. Quieter. Settling into something underneath the jokes. I need you to know that this is exactly what I wanted. Not just the getting married part, though yes, also that part. I mean, I wanted you to be okay. I wanted you to have someone who says true things. Someone who cries in the car and then comes inside anyway. A small pause. If Trisha is somewhere nearby crying right now, the voice was very dry, tell her I knew she would. I accounted for it. Ji-won made a sound he couldn't contain. Fourth. Min-Ho looked at the camera. Do you remember the Saturday you stayed home? The first one. We sat on the floor and argued about neutron stars and you pretended not to know the density distinction even though you did. A pause. I wrote it in my notebook that night. I wrote, best Saturday. 2 words. That's all. His voice was very quiet now. I have a lot of Saturdays in that notebook, Appa. More than I expected to get. That's because of you. Ji-won's shoulders came forward. He wept without sound. I had a really good life. You gave me that. Please don't spend the rest of yours believing you didn't. A pause. Also, if you have children, tell them things. Out loud. Every time. Don't make them find it in what you do. Just say it. It doesn't take long. It took you one Saturday morning and it was enough for everything. Min-Ho looked at the camera for one last moment. Direct. Clear. Entirely himself. I love you. I knew you loved me back. I just needed you to say it. And you did. So we're okay. Then, the exact tone of a child who had walked into a gala with a notebook and a plan and had won every single argument since. Also. Page 3. Notebook. Permanent record. I was right about the jawline. The video ended. Ji-won sat in the quiet room for a long time. Then he stood. He straightened his jacket. He walked back out to where Trisha was waiting in the hallway. She looked at his face, at the brightness and the grief and the smile that was breaking through both of them at once, and she understood everything without asking. She took his hand. He held it. They walked back into the celebration together. 2 years later. The house was fuller now. Louder. Fabric samples in places fabric samples had no business being. Small shoes permanently by the front door. Crayon evidence on 2 walls that neither of them had been in any hurry to paint over. Their son was 2 years old. Bright-eyed. Constantly in motion. His father's jaw. His mother's instincts. A personality still revealing itself but already clearly full of opinions. It was an ordinary Sunday morning. Ji-won was at the kitchen table, sleeves rolled, working, because some habits were structural. His son came padding in on small feet, still in pajamas, and climbed onto the chair beside him with the focused determination of a toddler who had a destination in mind. He looked at his father. He reached up and patted Ji-won's face with one small hand. Twice. Then looked at him with enormous serious eyes and said, in the clear, certain voice of a child who had just noticed something important. Daddy. You're extremely handsome today. The kitchen went still. Ji-won did not move. From the doorway Trisha stood with her coffee cup halfway to her mouth. The word extremely sat in the morning air between all of them. Ji-won looked at his small son. His son looked back, already reaching for a piece of toast, completely unaware of what he had just done. Ji-won looked up at Trisha. She was already crying. Quietly. Coffee cup still raised. The way she had learned to do it, in small amounts, in the middle of regular life, because grief and love were not opposites and had never been opposites and never would be. Ji-won reached over and pulled his son against his chest. His son made a happy sound and grabbed a fistful of his shirt. Ji-won held him the way he had learned to hold the people he loved. Firmly. Completely. Without flinching. He said into his son's small head. I love you. I love you and I love you and I love you. His son said, already distracted by the toast, down, Daddy. Ji-won laughed. A real one. Open and full and unguarded. From the doorway Trisha smiled, and the smile broke a little and held. The way things did after they had been broken and healed. Which is to say imperfectly. Which is to say honestly. Min-Ho was not there. He had been gone 2 years. But extremely was there. And the argument was there. And the notebook was still in the drawer of the studio desk where Trisha had put it the night Mrs. Park gave it to her after the funeral. Evidence, Min-Ho had written on the cover in careful handwriting. In case anyone forgets. Nobody had forgotten. The small shoes were by the door. The crayon was on the walls. The table was full. And a father who had once been alone in every room he entered now could not get through a single morning without someone climbing on him, needing him, saying his name like it was the most important word they knew. Min-Ho had not come back. But in every way that mattered, in every room of that house, in the word extremely said by a toddler on a Sunday morning who had no idea what he was carrying. He had never fully left.